Every time I say Gulf of Mexico in a video, I get these comments. It's Gulf of America now. Update your maps. Somebody didn't get the memo. Hey, that's Gulf of America, buddy. It's Gulf of America. Get it right. I get it. I make maps for a living. If anyone should have the right name on their maps, it's me. So let me show you something. If I open Google Maps right now, Gulf of America, there it is. Done. Updated. Official. But watch what happens when I change the device settings to Mexico. Gulf of Mexico. Same water, same app, different name. And if I set my location to Germany, then I get both names stacked right on top of each other. So which one is the real name? That's what this video is about. And the answer is going to change how you look at every map you've ever seen. On January 20th, 2025, an executive order directed the Department of the Interior to update the Gulf's name in the federal government's official naming database, the Geographic Names Information System. By February, the official U.S. federal name was Gulf of America. Now here's what most people missed. The executive order didn't rename the entire body of water. Read the actual text and it specifically references the U.S. continental shelf area, the portion bounded by Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, extending to the seaward boundary with Mexico and Cuba. The U.S. renamed its part, which as a sovereign nation it has the authority to do. Mexico's part is still Gulf of Mexico, Cuba's part still Gulf of Mexico, and neither country has any obligation to change anything. Google updated almost immediately. Their policy has always been to follow the official naming authority in each country. So they did what they've always done. They made the label location dependent. You see the name your country recognizes. Apple and Bing took a similar approach for US users. OpenStreetMap didn't change at all. And here's a detail that got almost no coverage. The International Hydrographic Organization. That's the intergovernmental body that coordinates nautical charts worldwide. They don't actually have a name for it anymore. In 2020, they moved to replace names with numerical identifiers. Partly because naming disputes were becoming unresolvable. The international body responsible for naming bodies of water looked at the situation and essentially said, we're done naming things. So the Gulf of Mexico doesn't exist, and the Gulf of America doesn't exist, at least not according to the one organization whose whole job is naming bodies of water. They just gave it a number. Now, if this feels strange, one body of water, multiple names depending on who's looking, I want you to know that this is one of the oldest patterns in cartography. The river that forms the border between Texas and Mexico. Americans call it the Rio Grande. Mexicans call it the Rio Bravo. Same river, two names. It's been that way for centuries, and nobody argues about it in my comments. The body of water between Japan and Korea, Japan calls it the Sea of Japan, South Korea calls it the East Sea, and this dispute has gone on for decades. It's actually one of the reasons the IHO moved to numerical identifiers in the first place. The body of water between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Most of the world calls it the Persian Gulf, but most Arab nations call it the Arabian Gulf. Iran threatened to sue Google in 2012, not because Google used the wrong name, but because Google decided not to label it at all. They just left it blank. The English Channel. That's what the English speakers call it. The French call it La Manche, the sleeve. The body of water between England and France has two completely different names, depending on which shore you're standing on. Nobody thinks the English Channel is wrong, and nobody thinks La Manche is wrong. They're both right, but it depends on where you're standing. So if names can be different depending on who's looking at the map, where do the names come from in the first place? The name Gulf of Mexico first appears on a map in 1524. Hernán Cortés drew it on a document he sent to King Charles V of Spain. The name comes from Mexica, the Nahuatl word for the Aztec people. But the Aztecs didn't call it the Gulf of Mexico. They called it Chalchuchicle, the House of Chalchuchitle, their deity of the seas. So Gulf of Mexico is itself a European overlay on an indigenous name. It was an act of cartographic power. Cortés put it on a map to show a king what he'd claimed. And that's what naming on a map has always been. It's not labeling, it's claiming. Every name on every map is a decision somebody made about what matters, who matters, and whose perspective gets printed. When the executive order renamed it Gulf of America, that wasn't a break from how cartography works. That was cartography working exactly the way it always has. The question was never, what's the right name? The question is, and always has been, who's holding the pen? So what do we put on our maps? We're a map company. We have to put a name on that body of water every time we print. We need a system for that, not a political position, but a system. The US government follows its own naming authority, the Geographic Names Information System. Under that system, it's Gulf of America. We don't follow that system. We follow the United Nations. The UN is our reference for which countries we recognize, which borders we draw, and which names we use. That's our source of truth. Not any single country's naming authority, the international standard. And under that standard, it's the Gulf of Mexico. So that's what we print. Gulf of America is the official US federal designation. That's not incorrect. It's a point of view, one country's point of view. We can print it that way on request, but Gulf of Mexico is also a point of view. It just happens to be the one shared by the rest of the world and backed by about 500 years of cartographic continuity. So to everyone in my comments telling me to update my maps, I do appreciate you, but the name change you're thinking of applies to US federal usage. It's not an international law. It's not a global update. It's one country's decision about what to call its side of the water. And now you know that's how it's always worked. For every name, on every map, someone made a choice. The only difference is now you can see it.